did the 7 seals, now we're working on the 7 trumpets. Just as a quick review, the first trumpet was the green grass and 1/3 of the trees are burned up. In the second trumpet, 1/3 of the sea becomes blood, 1/3 of the ships and sea life are destroyed. In the third trumpet, 1/3 of the waters are turned bitter. The fourth, 1/3 of the sun, moon, and the stars do not shine. And now we're going to hit the fifth trumpet. We'll do the 5th and the 6th today. Hopefully we'll get through that whole thing. Okay? So, let's start with verses 1 through 3. Then the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven, which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the shaft of the abyss was given to him. He opened the shaft of the abyss, and the smoke ascended out of the shaft like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened from the smoke of the shaft. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given them, as the scorpions of the earth have power. All right, so this is, there's a lot going on here in this 5th trumpet. And the first thing that we see here is that a star fell from heaven. Now, the word here for Greek and for star can be used for a star, or it can also be used for an angel. And so the way that we would determine is this a star or is this an angel is to see that further on it says, and the key to the shaft of the abyss was given to him. You wouldn't call a star a him. Okay, so it's an angel. And that the word there, fallen, basically means he was thrown out of heaven. It wasn't like he just tripped and fell. It's like he was kicked out of heaven. What his function was there in heaven, I don't know. There's nothing that said, talks about any detail about what his function was, but he was kicked out of heaven, and his job was to go down and open up the shaft of the abyss. Now, what is the abyss? It is not Sheol. In Jewish theology, you have 2 parts of the afterworld, Sheol and the abyss. This is just one. It's sometimes called the bottomless pit as well. Okay, this is for humans. This is for demons and fallen angels. Let's just say fallen angels. Right, and there's some angels that when they rebelled, that's where they've been since the time they rebelled. The sense is here, this is probably the higher up angels, the ones that had more power. This is where they're being held right now. Okay, and so that when Christ died, he didn't go down to the abyss here. He went down to Sheol. And if you remember, he opened the door, and some of the people that were in Sheol were actually seen after his resurrection. Right? Everybody knew that, right?
Right.
Okay. So this is the level below it. I think Sheol also is called paradise. Okay. So anyway, we've got those 2 sections, and the abyss is where these demons are that are going to be let loose. We don't know where the abyss is. As traditionally, it's thought to be at the center of the earth. We think of the center of the earth, it's science says it's just a big, massive fire and molten rock and all that kind of stuff. And so it would make sense that that's where it is. Now, understand that the Jewish model, the ancient model of the earth is very different from ours. They didn't have a globe. They had it basically a flat, 4-cornered plane, and that underneath it was the pillars of the earth that held it up, and underneath there was the waters underneath, and the abyss was underneath there. And so don't really have a sense of where it is, but kind of makes sense that it would be in the center of the earth if you're talking about this kind of natural things occurring once the door is opened up. They're let out, because what comes out of it, once the shaft has been opened, smoke ascends out of the shaft like the smoke of a great furnace. So that will indicate that there's fire being burned down there. There's something burning down there. The smoke will come out. We don't necessarily pick this up, but the Jews reading this would have picked up this picture when, because what the smoke would represent in this case would be God's wrath. And anybody have any idea what event the Jewish mind would go back to? No? Okay. Nobody has a Jewish mind in here. Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah. When Abraham walked out of his tent, what did he see? Smoke as from a furnace rising from the plains. So the Jews would have gone back to, this represents God's judgment. Okay? This is another indication as to maybe, or another, I guess, point on the side of, this is where the tribulation starts, because now we're seeing God's wrath in a very real, symbolic way, like we'd seen it in the Old Testament. So you've got that smoke coming out, and then it says the sun and the air were darkened from the smoke of the shaft. Okay, so now it's darkened again, right? And it's thick enough that it's blocking out the sun. And the air becomes thick with this, much like, again, go back to Mount St. Helens, that sense of it being very thick. It's funny, I'm reading a book, and it's I don't know what you call it. I guess it's kind of like a Victorian age mystery thing. You know, it's one of those historical mystery things. And they have it takes place in England, and they have this in this story, one of the main characters is this smoke that moves across England, and the smoke is full of sulfur, and it's sulfuric acid, and it's in liquid form, and it's also in particle form. The main guy is the hero is a doctor, and so he's figured all this stuff out because he's so smart. And so when it comes, it totally blocks out the sun, and it makes the air unbreathable. And if you do breathe it, it gets in your lungs and it burns your lungs, and people are dying from the acid getting in there, mixing with the fluids and basically bubbling. Like, you know, when you see hydrogen peroxide bubble, it would be that kind of thing inside, and just destroys your lungs, so it kills you. So anyway, and so what my idea was early on in the book, I'm so smart, was to try and figure out where that was coming from. I told her, I bet this is a volcano. And the hero is saying the same thing. So I must be pretty smart.
Great minds think alike.
Great minds think alike. So you can see how, I mean, when we see it in, we see this happening in small quantities around the world throughout history. Volcanoes erupt, and they can cause great damage. Just talk to the people of Pompeii. That was great damage there. But you talk about what?
They're dead.
They're all dead.
Oh yeah. Don't talk to them then.
Not so smart.
Not so smart. But the thing is, that these things that we're seeing are not unnatural in the sense, it's the size and the magnitude. Now this is signaling something else altogether. And so as these things come out, this is coming out of that shaft as well. And then it says, verse 3 says, then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given them as the scorpions of the earth have power. Okay, so we've got what's being called, they're called locusts. Oh, I should have done that. And when we go through Revelation, we've talked about this before, we have to be careful how we look at these words. Some of them are literal, some of them are figurative or symbolic. All right, so when we look at this, it says the locusts upon the earth, and power was given them as the scorpions of the earth have power. So their power was like a scorpion. All right, so what's basically going to happen is they're going to cause some damage. Typically, what this is trying to say here is that when you see locusts, and you can see it here, their characteristic is that they swarm, don't they? I mean, they don't come one or two at a time. They're just a massive swarm. And so that's kind of really what John's trying to say here is that they're swarming like locusts would swarm. That's how many there are. Yes.
Are they supposed to be actual locusts, or are they supposed to be like demons, or what? What are
I don't know. Maybe we should go to verse 4 and find out. Okay. All right. So verse 4. They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not permitted to kill anyone, but to torment for 5 months. And the torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings a person. And in those days, people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death will flee from them. Okay, we still don't have a description of what they look like yet, but we have a description of what they're going to do. Okay, so they're going to be locusts, but they're going to be like scorpions. And so you've got locusts. They typically attack vegetation. Vegetation. Right? Okay, and scorpions sting. So what's happening here is that now they're being told, no, you're not going to do this, you're going to do people instead, which is very un-locust-like. So if they are locusts, they're going to be demonic in the sense that God's changing their nature for this period of time. All right? And how long is this supposed to last? 5 months. Chuck Missler pointed out that this is the same time that the flood, this is the same amount of time that the flood lasted.
They will attack the people that do not have
The
the seal
seal.
of God
Right,
on their
right.
foreheads.
We're going to get that to us again.
You gonna tell us what that seal looks like?
Like this. You got me off my track. Okay, so
Off your track, were
Yeah.
you on it?
now, this, what'd you say?
Were you on it?
Yes. I can go home. Very easily, I just pack up and leave. Okay, so you've got the sting here. It's only to attack people, but it's not going to kill them. Death is not part of this process. So the sting that the locusts are going to give is going to be, has anybody ever stung by a scorpion? Okay. My understanding, it's very painful. And it lasts typically for 3 days, 3 or 4 days usually. But now you have people that are going to be stung, and there's not going to be any relief for it.
Well, it's gonna be many stings.
Yes,
too.
well, yes. But it's the period of time that these guys are going to be around is 5 month period, and there's not going to be any relief. People are going to want to die, but it's not going to be available to them. Now, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's what I was.
Does that mean that God puts, it can mean a number of things. One, it could mean that God just puts death on hiatus and just says nobody dies for 5 months. Or it could mean that people die from other issues, but not from the stings. Or it could just mean that like the saying, they wish they could die, but they can't. It's not that it won't kill them. It just causes them massive pain. All right. So those are the three things, and we don't know which one is spoken of here. It's just somehow they are spared death. Whether that's a good or bad, it's probably a bad thing at that for them. All right. So that's their function, is to cause this tremendous pain. And it says they will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death will flee from them. So this is going to be something that's going to last for longer than a couple of days. This pain is going to be horrendous. All right. And then you can see the picture here. This is typically how locusts swarm. So it's not something that you can kind of dodge them. You know, that you're going to get. If you're in the way, you're going to get it. All right. All right. Verse 7. This is the answer to your question. The appearance of the locust was like horses prepared for battle, and on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold, and their faces were like human faces. They had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were like the teeth of lions. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots of many horses rushing to battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and in their tails is their power to hurt people for 5 months. They have as king over them the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he has the name Apollyon. The first woe has passed. Behold, 2 woes are still coming after these things. All right, so we get a little bit more information about these locusts. And we get an appearance. Now, sometimes it's hard for us to look at this and try to understand what it is John's trying to say. And so we try to make a picture of what he's saying and juxtaposition it to our vocabulary today. And sometimes that just doesn't work, because all John had was the pictures, the words that he had at that particular time. The only way a soldier could ride in his day was either on a camel, a donkey, or a horse. And by this time, horses were being used in battle more than donkeys were. And camels, not as much, but I'm sure that he'd seen some. So he's going to use things that he's familiar with to describe what he's seeing. He hadn't seen a tank, he hadn't seen a helicopter, so we don't know exactly what it was. He's just using what he knows to describe it. Okay? So, he said they were prepared for battle, and on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold. Now, this crown would not be a royal crown. It is the crown that we've talked about before. It's the laurel, which is signifies victory. Okay, and their faces were like human faces. They weren't human faces; they were like human faces. It'd be like looking at a cloud and going, "Oh, that looks like Mike Johnson up there." I mean, it's not him, but it's not him. Okay, and because it's fluffy and anyway. But it's that kind of thing that has the semblance of a human, but it's not a human face. And so you see pictures like this where they have a human face, and that's not what John is saying. They're not human. Okay? They had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were like the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots of many horses rushing to battle. So in ancient time, when they had chariots and these battle horses, you could hear them coming before they came, and it was loud, and you could feel it, because if you were a foot soldier and they were coming at you, you could tell they were coming, just because of the ground and the noise it made, especially with the metal. And the mail that they wore at that was the mail like we see in the Middle Ages, where it's rings attached. It'd be like it was metal plates that were stacked like scales on a fish. Okay, so those things would have probably had some movement to them too, which would have made some noise on top of that. So the point John's making here is that they're not sneaking up on anybody. They're making a loud noise. They're being very loud. People know that they're coming. Okay.
It looks like it'd be pretty large too.
Well, could be. Don't know.
Well, if they're swarming though, the collective.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to, like, when they say you can tell when a tornado's coming because it sounds like a locomotive is. You hear, it's kind of that same kind of thing. I mean, you get enough of them together making noise, it's going to impact. It's going to make sound. So I don't know if they're large, or it's just because there's so many of them. that this noise is just magnified by the numbers of them, okay? Now, the other thing that makes these creatures different from locusts is that they have a king. Locusts do not have a leader. They're very independent. They just kind of go on their own and do their own thing. These are different. They have a leader that has brought them out, that's leading them out of the pit, and he has a name. It's Abaddon, and he's telling them, he's directing them what they to do. So the other thing that these locusts have that normal locusts don't have is they have intelligence. They can be led. They can be given directions to follow. So we're seeing something very, very different here than what normal locusts would be like. All right? And the damage they cause is going to be massive. So this is the end of the first woe. Yes?
And there's just one thing I picked up on, I thought it was a little odd, is in canonized scripture, you know, we have other sources, but in our actual Bibles, there are only 2 angels that we know by name, and there are 2 fallen angels that we have names for. I just always thought that was a little odd.
Well, and that's,
Satan and
yeah.
Apollyon, Michael and Gabriel.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's some of these extra scriptural sources can be beneficial because, for instance, Enoch goes into greater detail on who these guys are, who these fallen angels are, who the leaders are, and what they brought to man, you know, I suspect it would have been nice if you know, Moses or somebody had just said, and here's the table of angels, and just listed it. But I suppose if you start doing that, where do you stop? And then you got this tome that's like this big, and then nobody would bring it to church.
Well, and the
So-
other thing too is in the letters, it said there was a problem with people worshiping like angel genealogies, so I think that was kind of on purpose.
Yeah, and you know, we see that to a certain extent in Catholicism. You know, those pictures I showed of the 7 angels are from Jewish angelology, but angels play an important part in the Catholic canon, and so I think that's all part of it. I mean, the focus of the Bible is supposed to be God and Jesus, and our need for salvation. And some of this other stuff, there's other sources, and you can take them with a grain of salt. For some reason, typically they weren't allowed in if the author could not be verified. And so
I just always thought it was odd that 2 and 2.
right, yeah, I never thought of that. Okay, some people believe too that Apollyon is a version of Apollo. I can't find that anywhere, that Apollyon is just another version of the name Apollo. So I would just take it for what it is. I wouldn't say it's anything other than this name Apollyon. Okay. All right, so here's what the locust that we get in this part of the country is not the same as the locust that they have in the Middle East. This is a picture of locust that's in the Middle East. And you can see by looking at this face, it does look human-like. Don't you see the teeth? The teeth. And so you got this picture of, if you're looking at it, you could say it had the face of a human. Now, is that what John is saying? Don't know. But again, when we look at the locust, we have to understand that the locust in the Middle Eastern area is very different from the locust we have here. But
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I would think that if he had said locust and he really meant locust, and then he goes into describing this creature, that I don't know if it would really look like a locust, because they would be pretty familiar with what it would look like.
right, yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay, and then, or could it be this?
Yeah.
Some end timers believe that this is what that John's talking about. And you can see that the top one has the different parts of the helicopter matched up with the description of the locust. And I suppose they could kill you with the blade on the tail. But the other aspect too is that the rockets they shoot out of this have the booster flame that comes out when they shoot it off. Apparently these helicopter pilots all wear gold helmets, and which could be, in John's eyes, a crown, because it's gold. There's also female pilots, so is that the one with the long hair? Long hair could very well have been, we don't know for sure, it could have been referring to power. We think of Samson having long hair, and that's where his power, strength came from his long hair. Pagan warriors believed also that their long hair was their power. What about Absalom? I mean, Absalom thought, his hair was what he really thought his best feature was. It ended up killing him, but at any rate, so that may be what John is talking about here, is that it's this idea that they had this power, and it was long, that it was strong. So
Where would the sting come in though?
the rocket's coming out here. Now the sting would be here on the tail, and again, it could be, it could, I don't know. Again, I don't know. This is us trying to say, well, it's some modern weapon, okay? I don't see that there's a one-to-one correspondence, but I guess you could say that kind of looks like a locust,
Oh, yeah.
and it has the mouth of a, they all could have these faces on them. And then here's the view of one of pilots. So if John saw that, how would he describe that? I mean, who knows? We know what it is, so we know how to describe it. So, anyway, yes, Bert?
Just a couple things, like with the tail. I know decades ago, I heard old Hal Lindsey, he was a big proponent of the helicopter theory. And whether this is true or not, I never verified it, but he said there were models of helicopters then that could shoot nerve gas out of the tails section of these helicopters.
Right.
And
And I wouldn't doubt
I've
it.
never heard that since, and the hair thing, I always thought of, if this was connection to that, maybe this.
The rotors.
Yeah, the rotors,
Yeah.
the shimmer from that.
Yeah. And again, I'm not telling you that's what it is, I'm just sharing what.
Yeah.
And
I don't really follow
Mark Carell
either.
this is where he goes with this, is the modern weapons. And it could be, but I wouldn't get hung up on what it is, because you could waste a lot of time and energy trying to figure out and prove what it is one way or the other, okay? All right, so let's go on to the next. Okay, that's the end of the fifth trumpet, okay? The sixth trumpet. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released, so that they would kill a third of mankind. The number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. All right, so we've got the next trumpet, and what John hears is voices coming out of the four horns, or a voice coming out of the four horns. Now the question is, what is this altar? Most people believe it is the incense altar of incense, right? Because that was the one that was gold and it had the four horns on it. The problem is that there was another altar in the tabernacle that also had four horns, and that was the offering, the altar of offering, sacrifice. That also had four horns. The problem is, but there it wasn't gold. okay? So is it possible that in heaven, that particular altar is now gold? Okay, so let's look at that briefly. If we take a look at what has taken place, and we're just kind of saying, let me get rid of my seal here. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that, I'm sorry. The ones that are protected by the seal are the 144,000. Those are the ones that will not be touched by those locusts because they are protected. They're specially protected by God during that particular time. Just like the section we read in the Old Testament in Zephaniah, or was it Zechariah? Zechariah, where the ones that had the seal were protected from the angel of death. Everyone who didn't have the seal was killed. Same thing is going to happen for these 144,000. What? No? Okay. So we've got two options. One is the incense, and one is the blood offering. Up until previously, we dealt with a special group of people that weren't living, but they were placed under this altar. And they are the who? The martyrs. And what were they doing? This was back in the seals.
Right.
What did they want?
Vengeance.
They wanted vengeance.
Yeah.
They wanted God to avenge their blood. So if they're under the altar of incense, it kind of follows that this is God saying,
No.
the rest is over. Now is time. Okay? So I think that the argument here is better for this than this. Okay? These martyrs are underneath that altar, and God is finally going to answer their cry. All right? And there's people that disagree on that. So take that for what it's worth. All right, so this trumpet impacts who?
I would say
No.
everyone that could hear.
No, no,
Not everyone?
no,
No, no.
When the trumpet's blown, who's responding?
Oh, you mean the four angels?
Yeah.
Four, maybe,
Four angels.
at the great Euphrates.
Yep. At the Euphrates. We talked about this back in Exodus, I'm pretty sure. And when God promised this land, this area to Abraham, what was the northern border supposed to be? The Euphrates River. It was supposed to go up as far as the Euphrates River and as far south as the Wadis of Egypt. Did Israel ever get to the river Euphrates? No. In fact, there was only one king who actually tried to do that, and that was David, which is kind of interesting. David was the only one who tried to get up there. So you've got this region where these are the four angels. They're flashing. And I'm surprised, to be honest, I'm surprised that made it through. The animation made it through. But, so you've got these four angels on the Euphrates River. And that's what the yellow things are. Those are the angels. Okay? And just in case you didn't know. And they have been bound up until this point. Now, when you bind someone, are they usually like, hey, let's play a game. You bound me first, and then untie me, then I'll bind you. No. When you're bound, it's usually against your will. You have something else that you want to do, and someone binds you to prevent you from doing it. So these angels have been bound up until this point, preventing them to do what it is that they were created to do. Okay? And then here's a little better idea of where the Euphrates is. You can see Euphrates runs right through the middle of the picture there. That's a 1,700-mile river. So the northern border of Israel is supposed to be 1,700 miles long. All right? I think what's interesting here is we've got 4 angels, and there are 4 major countries here in this area: Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And I don't think historically any of those are really lovers of Israel. But at any rate, so these angels are there at that point, and what is their function? It says they are to kill a third of mankind. So is that a regional thing? Is that worldwide? Most likely, if we take a look at this here, the major attack is probably going to be against Israel, just because that's where they're located. And if you believe that the Garden of Eden was there in that Mesopotamia area, I mean, this is God's area that Satan has taken over. Don't forget, this is the area where Nimrod brought the people together and created the first religion, anti-God religion. Okay? And they built the Tower of Babel. And the whole world, the world economy, and I use the word economy not just for money, but the way the world functions originated here in Babylon. Okay? So this is where the world system originated. And this is supposed to be Israel's area. And Satan took it from them. So part of this is all about God getting back his territory, and Israel getting back the territory that had been taken from them. And that's a really simplistic way of putting it. But you've got those 4 armies, and those 4 angels, I'm sorry, and their function is to kill a third of mankind. Well, if they're going to attack Israel, a third of the world's population doesn't live in Israel. But we would be foolish to think that if Israel was attacked and there was war, battles going on, that there wouldn't be collateral damage in other areas. I mean, it's got to happen. It doesn't just happen in a little bubble. Okay, so the attack would be there, but there's going to be collateral damage. Now, the army that he leads is 200 million. Now, 200 million, is that figurative? Is it literal? In the Bible, there are a lot of times there are numbers that are given that are rounded off. They're just meant to represent a large. So does this just mean a lot of military men, or is it really 200 million? Well, John said he heard 200 million. So we've got to assume that that's how many there are. But if it's 1 million less or 1 million more, that's irrelevant. But the army's 200 million. Now the question is, where does this army come from? Well, there are some people that believe it's going to come from China. Apparently China has already built a highway to the border of India. And it's just a matter of time, them hooking through to India, and it would have this massive highway that would allow them to move into the Euphrates region very easily. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not. I assume it's true, but there's another issue here that we've got to take a look at. When you look at this is in 2021. The size of the armies in the top 10 maybe countries in the world, nobody even comes close to 200 million. And if you add those guys up, it's not 200 million. But what if the Chinese decided, let's just say it's China. I'm just using China. I don't know why I am, but let's just say it's China. They decide they require all of their men to go into this battle. Now you're talking potentially 200 million. And if their allies join along with them, then you could have it because their population is large enough that they could have that. This is just a standing army. These are the guys that are in uniform. Yes, Bert?
I was gonna say, I think a lot of these countries also have huge paramilitary.
Yes.
They have a large percentage of paramilitary in there that are not in their official standing army.
I want to say that the paramilitary in China is like 600,000, something like that. But even still, you're not going to get the 200 million without starting including the population. And I guess if you conscript soldiers from countries that you take over as you go through. But at any rate, it's got to be some kind of concerted effort to get that kind of number. No. Okay. All right.
I was just thinking, that's all.
Okay, just thinking.
Oh.
All right. So, and I guess I'm telling you that because I heard when I was in high school that I think Hal Lindsey may have been the person who said China has an army of 200 million. Well, they don't really. But so you have to know what's here to go, I guess they probably could come up with it if they had to, or if they wanted to, but in terms of a standing army, they don't. They don't. All right, verse 17, and this is how I saw in my vision the horses and those who sat on them. Again, don't take it literal, all right? The riders had breastplates the color of fire, of hyacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses are like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, came fire and smoke and brimstone. A third of mankind was killed by these three plagues, by the fire, the smoke, and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents and have heads, and with them they do harm. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, again, this is where it helps to have somewhat of an understanding of the Old Testament. Okay, now, if I'm looking at this and I'm just initially I spent all my time in the New Testament, and I'm kind of maybe not really a Bible scholar. I could be a baby Christian or whatever. And I'm thinking this end time stuff is stuff that's going to happen in my time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and make a picture of what this is today. What is it? He can't describe our weaponry in terms of a first century Jew. So when he uses the word horses here, he's talking about something that would be ridden, okay, and would be used in war. So you've got a rider and you've got some vehicle, and in his vocabulary, the only thing he's got is horse, right? They don't have anything else. It's not a chariot, because it doesn't look like a chariot, but it's a horse because it's being ridden into battle. And the riders are described, first of all, and they have breastplates the color of fire, hyacinth, and brimstone. Hyacinth is a blue, isn't it?
Blue.
Blue.
Yeah.
So it's red, blue, and yellow. Don't know if there's a significance about that, but some of the stuff, except for the hyacinth, sounds like hell to me. Hyacinth, I guess, are supposed to be pretty, aren't they? But when you look at a hot flame, what color's in there? Red, yellow, and blue, right? So this could be a symbol of where they come from, who is controlling them, all right? And the heads of the horses are like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire and smoke and brimstone. So the head of the lions, what part of the head is John focusing on? The mouth. Okay, so let's put that down here. All right. And then it says, a third of mankind was killed by the three plagues, which came out of their mouths, for the power of the horses in their mouths and in their tails. Oh, not trails. Tails. I'm gonna go home and go back to bed. And then we've got this red, blue, and yellow. Okay? So, in the vernacular, I don't know if vernacular is the right word or not, but this is what comes to people's minds. A tank. The mouth would be like a lion. You know, when a tank shoots off the shell, it's very loud. Okay, lions are very loud. What comes out with the shot? Flame does, right? Okay. Smoke. And you've got the ability in the back end. If you got someone posted there, you could cause some damage. That's one option. Here's another, I guess, a more modern version of the tank. And I'm not sure, I think he said the Chinese have this, and it's supposed to be faster than any tank out there. But it's a lot more modular, and you can see how it might look like a rider on a horse to a certain extent. And then here's a prototype, apparently a prototype the Chinese have for a tank.
It looks like something out of Star Wars.
It does. It does. Now, again, whether it is or not, I'm not saying. That's just what he said. But there's important aspects to this that those things don't answer. We've got the mouth and we've got the tail. The tail is like a serpent with a head. What does a serpent represent in the Old Testament? Sin, right? Evil, sin. Okay? And I always wondered why God had, when Moses held up the snake, and I was like, why are you doing that? I thought that was like the devil. And the point is that God was making them face their sin. They had to look at the snake and confess their sin. The snake represented their sin that they had to confess. Okay? So this soldier has a mouth and a tail. That's where the power comes from. So what if this is really talking about the message of the Antichrist? That the mouth is the words of their theology, which is anti-God, and that the snake with the head shows intelligence, and so the snake with the head is that whole idea of the message of the Antichrist against God, anti-God. Now, if you look at it that way, 200 million is a very easy number to reach, isn't it? You don't think 200 million people will buy into the Antichrist message? Easily. Easily. And so that may be what it is he's talking about. It's this message of the Antichrist. In other words, the theology of Satan that's being put forth here, and that it's causing this damage. Bert?
Yeah, I'm so easy to read. Something just occurred to me. I know we wouldn't be anywhere near it right now, but what about drones?
Well,
That could be mass produced.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we don't have near 200 million military drones on the planet.
I don't.
But-
I suspect China has enough in their factories that
Yeah,
they could
that
change
they
them
could.
over to military use pretty quickly.
It'd be a
Instead of
whole lot
selling
easier
cars
to
on
develop a
AliExpress.
drone than a soldier.
Yeah,
That much time.
that's a good possibility. I hadn't thought of that. And
Yeah, I didn't.
that
think
wasn't,
this now.
you know, that wasn't something that, I mean, that's really been like in the last couple of years that's become, you know, they become
Didn't
cheaper.
a drone just attack a ship out in the sea, a tanker or something, and blow it up just recently, like last week?
Was that a drone?
That's what I think I read.
The concern I have there would be the payload. I mean, what would I don't know.
Well, China's got all that money, why
Yeah.
not?
I think drones are, I mean, that makes sense. And, you know, they're flying, they're swarming. So it would kind of fit that scenario. And I would assume that they could, you know, swivel around and do whatever they want to do. That's a good point. Okay. So the question here is this, in these verses, is the damage literal damage like we see? Or is it, because it does say that they kill, but of the two ways of dying, which is the most devastating, physically or spiritually? Spiritually. So if this is the message going out of for lack of a better term, Satan's message, then these people are truly dying in a permanent way. Okay, so that's just something to think about. Maybe go past the tanky thing. And then verse 20, the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands so as not to worship demons and the idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see, nor hear, nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders, nor their witchcraft, nor of their sexual immorality, nor of their thefts. So, I mean, the people being impacted by these plagues are non-believers. And if the world is converting to the message of the Antichrist, he hasn't been introduced yet, but just that theology of Satan, then Christians are going to suffer. People who become Christians are going to suffer during that time. And that's kind of because the rapture has already taken place. If what we say is true, it's true. There's no believers left. Any believer will be a new one that comes after the rapture. Okay? And so, of course, man's response to all this devastation and this destruction is to continue doing what they were doing. Same old, same old. And I had some charts, we're not going to have time to go through them. But some of the things that we would take a look at, what time?
10:26.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look at when people ask and when people talk about who the worst dictator in the world was, people typically say Hitler. And in fact, he did not kill the most people. That was Stalin. Stalin was way, if you can have a scale, way worse than Hitler. One of the worst things you could be was Stalin's friend. He killed all of his friends. I mean, he was just a lunatic. And he killed 62 million people in all, Jews and peasants. And Mao killed 49 million, or he was responsible for 49 million, and Hitler 21 million. Okay, so we've seen these kind of killings go on in a world before. This won't be anything new to people. Murders continue, as the verses say. Murders will continue. In 2020, there was a spike in murders in the major U.S. cities. There was a 74.1% spike in murders in Seattle. New Orleans was 61 or 62%. Atlanta was 58%. This is 2020. Okay? And we're talking about defunding police.
Yeah.
Okay. My point here is that murders are not going down, they're going up. Drugs, which is what witchcraft is talking about there in that verse when it says witchcraft. It's really talking about drug use, because the soothsayers and those people at that particular time, as John wrote, would be in the influence of drugs to do their soothsaying. So it was part of the occult, part of their worship process. So you got 72,000 people died of drug overdose in 2019. Now, that's probably legal and illegal together. Okay, and we're just seeing, you know, we see that more and more, when you go to the doctor, are you not surprised that the doctor will just say, here, take this pill and you'll be fit? I mean, it's not like, even like, well, try to find out what the problem is.
Well, you gotta look at the drugs, I mean, this is a political, but coming across the border now. I mean.
Yeah,
it's
I
just
mean,
unreal.
it's going to increase,
Yeah.
okay? It's going to increase. And then we have the number of abortions. Now, I was kind of surprised. Actually, abortions have come down since the 90s. But I still think that 862,000 is too many in 1 year, okay? And then rapes. This is, I think this is just for 1 year. Yeah, 2015. There were, the people that were raped, and this is just the United States, would make a city bigger than Las Vegas, Atlanta, or Miami. In fact, I have this other data here. It would, if you took all those people and made a country out of them, made a city, they'd be the 28th most populous. And if they were a country, they'd be the 800th most populous. Okay? It would outrank 66 others in terms of population. So we're not seeing a decrease, and this message that's going to be coming after the rapture is not one of reconciliation and acceptance of everybody. People are going to continue doing what they're doing, thumbing their nose instead of God's trying to say, look, it's going to end, you need to repent, and they're not going to do it. They're just going to keep on keeping on. In fact, they're going to just, shake their fists at God and turn their back on him. Much like Pharaoh did. Pharaoh did the exact same thing. He didn't take the message and go, okay, this guy's serious, I need to change my ways. He decided to be stiff-necked about it. So, things are not going to get better. Things are not going to get better. Any comments or questions? No? Okay.
I just agree with what you're saying, that things are going to get worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, I mean.
Yeah.
And there's just so many people that just follow along and they don't investigate things, fact check things to see what's going on. It's just wanna bury their heads in the sand.
It's what I read someplace, the death of discernment. Nobody's discerning
thing.
anymore. All right, well, let's close in prayer. Our dear Father, we just are so thankful for the way that you show your love to us each and every day, and that you have this word for us here in Revelation. I pray that you give us insight, give us wisdom as we look into what it is you have for us there, and give us a glimpse of what it is that you're saying. I pray that you would just help us to live lives that bring honor and glory to you, and would impact the lives of the people who come in contact each and every day. In your name I pray, amen. Thank y'all.
Thank you.